on! Move it like you mean it! Wrestle, Nick! Nick, let me show you. You only need your right hand to pull this off. Yep. Not bad.
So this is mixed martial arts?
We're not MMA fighters.
But we're wrestlers. The best foundation to start with.
He's pinned! He's pinned!
Hey, you here for the tryouts?
I can't fight this guy.
Nice going. I watch you train every day.
I won't give up.
You ready?
You can go pro.
Yes!
This kid's the real deal. Every fighter that he's taken on has been legit. And he has not lost.
I can't stop.
You're a sideshow. You're giving real fighters a bad name.
Sideshow's about to beat your ass!
The XFC is denying your right to fight.
I want to be heard.
Nick's a contender for the title. This is his shot.
He's proven that he can handle it.
No limit.
Nick has the right to have the career he wants to pursue.
If you love something, you have to work twice as hard as everyone else.
Nick Newell against Rich Reynolds for the lightweight championship belt.
You won't stop me now.
I ain't come this far to lose.
No limits.
Remember what we practiced!
Stand up for yourself.
You can do it, Nick!
How many punches am I gonna have to take before I get him to the ground?
A few. But you got a thick skull.
The City of Brockton is now in your hands. The Brockton, Mass. City of Champions app is a revolutionary civic app that will give whoever downloads it a full picture of the City of Brockton. Users of this app can discover new businesses and restaurants, have access to the local transit system schedule, learn who the Brockton elected officials are, explore attractions and amenities, and stay up to date with the latest news and information going on in the City of Champions. Among the many amazing features of the app is its business directory feature. This business directory is comprised of over 2,000 known businesses in the City of Champions. Business owners who claim their business will have the advantage of free promotion on the app. They will have the ability to inform users of their menus, special deals and discounts, and any other pertinent information. Here's how to claim your business. First, on a laptop or computer, visit claim.mycivicapps.com and click the Claim My Business button at the bottom of the screen. Next, type in Brockton, Mass. City of Champions plus your business name in the appropriate search bars. Once your business appears on the screen, press Claim, enter a name, email, and password for the account, and click Continue. Finally, fill out all of your pertinent business information. This includes everything from the business location, hours, and more. Once complete, click the Save and Send to Moderator button for final approval. Once the moderator approves, your account is all yours to customize and use however is best for your business. If you cannot find your business on the app, please email listmylocalbusiness@gmail.com, and a moderator will ensure your business is inputted into the app for you to claim. The Brockton, Mass. City of Champions app is available for download on both the Apple and Android app stores. Download the app today.
All right. Is everyone here? Ants!
Yes, sir!
Roaches! Yeah, what of it? Rodents. Let's get this cheese. All right, come on, everyone, settle down, please. Look, we all know why we're here. We'll be eating like queens when we're through with this. That pantry's finally ours. Nobody can stop us now. Charge! No, there's no way. It can't be. It's Old Colony! Old Colony Pest Control. Veteran-owned Massachusetts, Rhode Island-based operation with everything you could dream of for your pest needs. Equipped with top-of-the-line gear to guarantee your home is protected and staying healthy. Phone number is 774-400-5993. Give them a call for the backup you need. Tell them that General Red Revere sent you. They handle anything from ants, roaches, ticks, mosquitoes, rats, and more.
No wildlife or termites at this time.
Hey, watch it, buddy. We're marching.
Another lesson from my neighborhood. Do you know how to tell if mom is overdosing on drugs? If your mom shoots dope every day like mine, you can only help her if you know the signs of an overdose.
An overdose?
Yes, an overdose. Don't call the ambulance if you're in doubt, unless she shakes uncontrollably or foams at the mouth. That's an overdose.
Okay, that's an overdose.
That's an overdose.
You could find her on the floor or find her in bed, and if you know what to do, she won't end up dead of an overdose.
Really?
Yes, an overdose.
Well, I don't know.
The signs of danger are simple to see. If she's twitching and seizing and can barely breathe, that's an overdose.
Yeah.
That's an overdose. That's an overdose. Mom always knows best.
What up, everybody? Kevin Jackson here. If you feel the need and you want to get in touch with the hot topics from today's headlines, you got to check out The Booth with Keith Sinister One Hayes. Tell him Kevin Jackson sent you.
It's caught in the crossfire.
Why don't you look at the registered voters on there? How many registered voters are on there? Do you even know the answer to that?
No, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of this here.
Zero. There's zero.
So, my question then is if the
Guess how many? Wait. What about the turnout rate? 120%.
Let's let Representative Johnson ask his question, please.
So the poll book number. There's two things that could happen here. Either the poll book number, if ballots were counted multiple times, there's two options. Option number one is that the poll book numbers are not going to match.
They don't.
The actual. Not by thousands and thousands of votes. That's not what we see right now.
Take a look again. Take a look again.
Option number two is that they essentially were filling in names of people who didn't vote.
Dead people too?
So is that?
Let's
I guess,
let
is that
Representative Johnson ask his question, and then when
I
he's
thought that
done,
was his answer. Okay.
Well, I guess that's my question here is why we're not seeing the poll book off by 30,000 votes. That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
This is blasphemy. This is madness. This is the Booth.
All right, your boy Sinister One broadcasting live from the City of Champions. You are listening to The Booth. It is 2022, January 4th, the first show of the new year. And, you know, you saw these guys last year, the first Tuesday of every month. We start out the first Tuesday every month with these guys. But I got a big thanks to my special guest, last special guest of 2021, Crystal Tyson. She was on my show and closed out with the nice Christmas holiday show we did. And I got my guests on here, Ken Diesel, R Squid. Say hello to everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
And we got a lot to talk about. I save a lot of these legal stories and things of that sort for these guys here in the booth. There's a one story that I actually held over from last year that I wanted to discuss with these guys that we're going to get into the legal booth. But as we get into this show right now, I got to get right into the news booth, but I got to thank my sponsors, MDB Electronics, Michael Douglas Barreto, as you guys saw with the news super intro. Thank you to Ron Drago. Thank you to Young Swisser Beats for the beat. But Michael Douglas Barreto is one of my sponsors, MDB Electronics. Also check out Vianna Marie's music everywhere, online, streaming everywhere. Also check out Tactical Target Systems when I go to the range. Those are the targets that I use. And Boston Sports. I love bostonsports.com. This is the winner at the end of last year, John Hayes. He won a shirt. That's his picture. And I got to thank I Love Boston Sports, Mahalan Williams, for letting us have the stuff to give to people who are in the chat. Also, Old Colony Pest Control, veteran owned by Carl Bonnell. Give him a shout if you have any pest issues. And we're here. We're in the news booth. I got my guys with me. And the first thing I want to talk about locally, Michelle Wu calls the COVID testing lines absolutely unacceptable. I'm torn over this because there's a lot of reasons why we have the long lines for the COVID testing. And originally, before what all went down, we had enough places to do the testing. The problem is that we have a perfect storm of situations right now. You had a lot of people who procrastinated about getting their vaccinations because of the whole thing with January 15th and the Supreme Court ruling as far as the 100 employees or more. Supreme Court ruled that anybody with 100 employees or more can mandate the 100 employee or more vaccination mandates and stuff of that sort. So you got a lot of people who are upset about that. So now they're being forced to rush out and get tested. I know at my location, they are going to allow employees to get tested every week. If you don't get tested every week, then you can lose your job. They've already laid off, I want to say 100 state troopers here. There have been some military personnel who've lost their jobs already. I forget what the number was. It about 1,000 that they let go last week, R squared?
They broke it down by service, so it was a few hundred per service.
Service. And, Ken, you're out there in the legal area, and, there's a lot of talk about, once this all kicks off on January 15th, there's a lot of people not going to be allowed into buildings, they have to follow the rules, you're going to have to either get your vaccination. Michelle Wu is put into place. You're going to need proof of vax to even go out to eat at a restaurant or go to a sporting event or go to a concert, which most of these events have been already taking your QR code or taking your vaccination card. So, I mean, it's nothing different than what we're already been doing, but people are pissed. They're upset. And what do you see, Ken? Because you deal with a lot of state and government buildings.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, the courts have gone back to doing the questions and doing the temperature checks and asking if you're getting vaccinated. So I was saying that in my hometown of Melrose, they put the mask requirement back on for all public buildings, not just governmental buildings. And my answer is, so what? I mean, there in case
we're 2 years into this.
Noticed we've got a pandemic. It's where the intrusion is minimal. When I was younger, we had to show proof of vaccination for any number of events that we had to go to, including sporting events. If you want to participate in sports to go to school, you have to show ID to buy liquor. So what? I mean, I have to show ID, to pick up my mail, for God's sakes. So I don't think it's in position.
All right, and I got a question. I got a question for Rob when we get to this news story later on in the news booth. Also in the news booth, over 100. Okay, so earlier when I took this story, The tally was 150 teachers that called out sick after the winter break. And there's a lot of reasons why teachers are calling out, because they're coming back from traveling, and they now have this whole thing that flipped around, because it was just before Christmas that they put the mandates back into place for employees over 100. So a lot of these teachers are coming back from vacation. They're not tested yet, and they're calling out sick. Some of them, a lot of teachers are out with COVID because this Omicron is taking advantage of a lot of people. It's hitting them real hard. So we've got, it was 150 earlier today. As of 5 o'clock, 5:30 today, we were up to 1,000 teachers that called out in Boston alone, which is why we had school closures today. Brockton has closed school for the entire week because they have so many staff out due to COVID. So this is going to be a crazy situation. My son's in the charter school, and they had said that it's going to be a day-by-day basis. So now he goes to school every day, not knowing if he's going to have school tomorrow, because it all depends on the rise of the COVID numbers as we get into the thick of this. Because, again, we're just coming off of New Year's. Usually it's like a 10 to 2 week period for incubation. So we're going to see this big surge in the next couple of weeks. So we'll see. And here's the one I have for R squared down there in Florida. COVID numbers. You guys are breaking records down there. And, Governor DeSantis was under fire last week while we were off air because he wasn't in Florida at the time when the numbers were rising and the hospitals were packed. He gets back, and instead of just taking the heat, he turns around and he blames the feds for creating hysteria in Florida. You want to talk about this? Because he's not your favorite guy. We know that on this show.
Well, look, some of these politicians made decisions early on, and they made decisions that they were going to play politics with people's lives. Because, in the very early stages of the pandemic, we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. We took the best evidence we could. We made the best decisions we could based on the evidence available. We continued to do research to figure out what the pandemic was and was not, what would work, what would not work, as far as safety measures and medications. And thank God we got the vaccines and what have you. And so all along the way, we have to make adjustments. How long should the isolation period need? Do we need a booster shot for the vaccines? Do masks work? Indoors versus outdoors? And we've made the adjustments along the way. And so, yes, it changes sometimes and what have you. But either you choose to do the things that will keep people safe and allow us to operate normally, allow us to go to work, allow us to go to school, allow us to go out and have some fun in a safe way, allow us to do the things that we can still do. We don't have to stay in our homes 24 hours a day if we take reasonable precautions. But then you had some political leaders, Governor DeSantis among the first, Governor Abbott of Texas, and a few others, who made the decision that their political calculus was such that they would not support that. They would actively work against trying to figure out what would keep people safe. They didn't care how many people in their own states died unnecessarily. And they didn't care to do anything because they made political judgments. And they're stuck with that decision. You can't now, a year later, when we kind of know what needs to be done and, we're going to get through this okay as a country. Maybe, it won't be easy. It won't be great, but we know we're going to get through it. They're stuck with the decisions they made, and they can't now reverse course. They chose to defy fact. They chose to defy science. They chose to defy logic. And they chose to put their own people at risk, to include their own voters, because it's their own voters who were the most susceptible to these foolish decisions that they made. It's their supporters that are choosing not to get vaccinated. It's their supporters that are fighting the vaccine requirements that are otherwise reasonable and certainly lawful, as Ken and I have discussed on this show a few times. They have, it's their own supporters that oftentimes are the ones that can't miss a paycheck. And so they are doing everything that is the exact opposite of what their own people need, but also all of the people of their states. Florida is a big, complicated state. Texas is a big, complicated state. So is California, so is New York, but you could see that those states have been trying. All the populous states, for the most part, have been trying to figure this out and do what's necessary, but you have a few exceptions like Florida and Texas. It is absolutely shameful. It is shameful that these leaders could probably win re-election, although it would be closer than previous years. We can only hope that enough people say, you know what, it's one thing to share some political philosophy, but these people didn't care if we lived or died. You can't have leaders who think that way. It's one thing to be wrong on a policy decision. We all are sometimes, but these people weren't wrong about something. They chose to do wrong. And that's unacceptable. And they don't deserve to be in office.
And you wrote some pieces we're going to talk into. You got a great piece that you just wrote. We're going to get into the legal booth. We'll be talking about the January 6th anniversary coming up. Ken, anything you want to add to that? Because there is another person that Ken's... Okay.
Absolutely not. I think Rob hit the nail right on the head with that.
Well, we're going to go into... And you're talking about people, this next topic coming up here. You're talking about people of power, people in place of power who are using... their decision making and pushing a dangerous rhetoric. And, we pull away from Florida, from Governor DeSantis, and let's head over to Georgia, where we have Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's down there in Georgia, who is in the news. She made some crazy statements just prior to Christmas in regards to a civil war and how the South should succeed. This is true. These are crazy statements she made. She went and backed it up and made more statements on Twitter to the point where they suspended her account for 30 days. And she went on and she made this whole big thing about them giving her the 30-day suspension. And then she went and put another tweet or something out that said that they wouldn't do this to Waters, Maxine Waters. And she started naming all the black politicians. So she threw race into this whole thing of her being shut down on Twitter. So Twitter turns around and says, hey, guess what? You know what? We're deactivating your account. Twitter just turned around and deactivated her account. So she goes to Facebook, and Facebook says, okay, well, you're not going to come here and do what you got suspended for and then had your account deleted. We're not going to put up with it. So now her account has been deactivated on Facebook. So now what has happened is she's pushing this crazy stolen election, all of these crazy things, the critical race theory that we discussed on the show, to the point where it's scary. I talk to these guys in the private chat. We have these discussions, and I talk about things that are in the government behind the scenes that these people's agendas are pushing that are scary. And they're scary because there are people who still follow these people's thoughts and believe their thoughts. And the scary thing is she's got people who believe the things she says. And a lot of people I've seen on my Facebook page, they're saying, well, that's wrong. It's a violation of her freedom of speech. No, it's not. It's not a violation of freedom of speech. You have a responsibility to do and act a certain way on Twitter and on Facebook. I'll let you guys talk about this because you guys are lawyers and it's not a right. It's a private site. I'll let Ken go first and then I'm going to let Rob talk.
This has been driving me crazy because I hear all these right-wing fanatics go on about how they're violating their rights. No. In order for there to be a First Amendment violation, you had to have something called state action. That means the state, the federal government or the state government or the county government or the city government has got to do something to interfere with you getting on Twitter. They didn't do anything, Matt. Twitter is a publicly traded corporation. They are outside of the state action doctrine. If they don't want you on their site because you violated their terms of use, which when you go on Twitter, you have to click that you've read their terms of use or terms of service and you agree to abide by them. If you violate them, they can kick you the hell off. Provided Twitter is not doing it based on race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or what they call a protected class, they can kick you off for any reason. I'm sorry. You have no right. And maybe they wouldn't have kicked off Maxine Waters. Yes, because Maxine Waters wouldn't be stupid and wouldn't violate their terms of service. Well, tough. You can't be on Twitter because you decide to be an idiot? Well, I'm sorry. There's no constitutional right to be an idiot on someone's private property. There's an old Vermont saying I like to quote that goes, your right to hit me ends where my nose begins. So your right to be an idiot on Twitter ends when Twitter decides it affects their brand.
Squared. I know you've
Yeah, I
mentioned
mean-
her before in the last year.
Yeah, look, Ken set the legal standard exactly right. That's what he said is spot on. Everybody pay attention to it. It's not state action. It's not a First Amendment issue. So let me expand on two other things that you mentioned. First, if you want to make comparisons to Maxine Waters, she's not my favorite member of Congress. All right. She has said incendiary things in the past. She has said some things that deserve to be commented on, to be criticized for some of those comments that she's made. Let's be fair about that. She has, and she has been criticized by people for those comments. However, if you want to compare her to Marjorie Taylor Greene or some of these other right-wing fanatics, the difference is Maxine Waters turns it on and off. She has, she's prone to make these extreme statements when she gets, motivated, excited, about something that's going on, and she should be criticized when she crosses the line as she has. She doesn't do it every day. It's not all she is. It's not all she does. When you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of her like-minded people, this is all they do. They don't have an off button. They aren't getting carried away. This is 100% of who they are and what they're doing day in and day out. So it's not the same thing as comparing, someone on the other side of the aisle who maybe makes an occasional statement that, again, deserves criticism when it's made, but it's not a pervasive thing. So let's not compare things that aren't the same. Now, as for the issues about the substance of Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, the issue is this. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Twitter and Facebook and other social media has become such the equivalent of media that there is some amount of protection or equality for different point of view. Let's just concede that for the sake of argument. They still lose because there is no right under the First Amendment, even if it applied, to go out and lie to people. Not everything you say is protected speech. I can't go out there and say certain things. I can't go out there and encourage people to commit crimes. That's called solicitation. It might be considered conspiracy. Those are both punishable offenses under the criminal code of the federal government and every state. And so there are all kinds of limitations when you use the public microphone that you have to say things that are inappropriate. You're not to be censored because you say things that people disagree with. That would be wrong. You're not supposed to be censored or quieted because even if you say things that are offensive to people, that's the way it is. If I want to be an ass, pardon my language, I have the right to be an ass and people don't have to listen to me. All right. But I cannot cross the line into taking to the public airwaves or the private airwaves and say things that are dangerous to society. I can't get up there and make a series of statements day in and day out that will cause people to die because of their extreme falsity. And that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. We could laugh about the comment she made about, what did she call it? The Jewish space laser, right? This isn't something that she said because she got carried away in the moment. These are some of the nonsensical things that she says all the time, and they're part of her being. So it's really kind of sad, actually. You could laugh at it because it's so ridiculous, but it's also kind of sad that this is a human being that thinks this way, that acts this way, and that somehow found her way into Congress. That's the thing that should be shameful, that the voters of Georgia, knowing who she is, sent her to Congress and sent her there again. Someone like her doesn't belong there. For the record, just so that everybody knows, we're not talking about some, one crazy person there. There are currently 42 people that are the equivalent of Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress or running incredible races to be in Congress. We could have 42 Marjorie Taylor Greenes in under a year in serving in Congress were they all to win. Now, that should scare the living crap out of people, because if you think dealing with one of her causes problems, imagine if there were 42 of her. Whether the Republicans are in the majority or the minority, whether Kevin McCarthy is the speaker or the minority leader, there is no dealing with 42 Marjorie Taylor Greenes. I think one is more than enough. And then you add in people like Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert and some of these other right-wing nut jobs, and I'm sorry to use that phrase, but they don't deserve respect because they are not respectable. These are people that have chosen, much like what we were just talking about with governors like Abbott and DeSantis, and Oklahoma's governor too, if I could put him in that category. These are people that have made, again, the political calculus that they want to appeal the worst to appeal to the worst among us, to appeal to the worst aspects of our human nature, to appeal to fear, to appeal to our quest for authority, and not to fight for democracy. They use the word freedom, but they don't believe in any aspect of freedom. They want to lie to people. They want to get people in danger. They don't respect anything about our Constitution. They don't respect anything about our government. It has nothing to do with any substantive disagreements we may have over policy. There may even be a few policy issues where we may find common ground where we actually deal with substance. When was the last time you saw one of these people, Jim Jordan, Louis Gohmert, Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I can name a bunch more, but I guess I'll stop there. When was the last time any of them spoke about a substantive matter, an issue of actual policy or something? They haven't. They haven't in years. They simply bloviate over nonsense. They get up there, they put on a show, they appeal to a base that we shouldn't even be acknowledging. They, it's incredibly dangerous. I don't mean to go on and on. I'm sorry, because Ken gave a great answer to your initial question here. It's just the fact is, this is different. This is a new, dangerous era in our politics. These are people, it's not about having Democrats versus Republicans allowed to be on social media. It's not about conservative or liberal. It's not about whether we agree or disagree with policy. I would fight to the death to defend conservatives' right to be heard on Facebook and Twitter, no matter how much I might disagree with them. And sometimes I do agree. I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time, but what have you. These are not politicians. These are not leaders. These are dangerous extremists that are abusing our Constitution, abusing our democracy to get rid of it. That is why Twitter and Facebook not only should act, but must act. And they need to get rid of all of these people. This should only be the beginning.
And I just thought of this. This is something new that I just thought of because Rob is very passionate in talking about this, and as I said, he writes his pieces over at the Corridor. So I'm gonna do this for Rob. This is gonna be a question that I'm gonna ask Rob when these topics come up. And we're always talking about people to stay informed. We're always talking about people to know the people behind the scenes and what they're. So if I was to take Marjorie Taylor Greene and how she's doing things right now and put her on a scale of 1 to 5, because I've said this is a scary time and there are people who we should watch that are dangerous to our democracy. If I had to do a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the worst, where would you scale Marjorie Taylor Greene on that scale as a danger to our democracy?
Oh, she's far off the scale is the problem.
Oh.
There's not a scale. If you're talking about, the Richter scale, you're talking about the EF scale, all these scales that talk about natural disasters, she's off the charts. Because these scales were made for things that exist in nature. And we're talking about people that are abominations of nature.
Wow. My son, Terrell, what's going on? He said Marjorie Taylor Greene has always been a freak, and you're right. And it's sad that she got reelected to Georgia. It's scary. Ken, anything you want to add? And if you want to put your thoughts on that scale?
Well, if I can, I think one of the things we need to understand, there's a difference between a politician and what we used to call back in the day a schlock merchant.
Mm-hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest of her culture are schlock merchants. They're entertainers. They're not in it for policy. Back in the 80s, I'm going to age myself. I know there was a guy who had a local television show in the New York area called Morton Downey Jr.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He's a right-wing conservative guy. Now, what's interesting about him is he could claim he's a legitimate politician because he stood for president on the Right to Life ticket. It was a legitimate party. He had run for political office, never got elected for anything, and was a fairly intelligent guy. And for years, he had a radio show, right-wing political, but very intelligent, would get on and talk on the issues. Maybe 20 or 30 people listened to it. Then he created this persona, the Morton Downey Jr. persona, and he got instant fame. And it was a horrible show. It was shot in the back of a warehouse in New Jersey someplace. But he got a lot of attention. And that's what these guys are. They are not politicians. They're not leaders. They're schlock merchants. And we can't talk with them. Back in the 80s, you could talk with the people who supported Reaganomics. I disagreed with them. But it was legitimate economic theory. And we can have discussions about why it was good or why it was bad and how we were basically using a credit card to have prosperity immediately, but then we're going to pay for it down the road, et cetera, et cetera. You could talk about the elimination of the dedicated Social Security fund. You could have intellectual conversations. We didn't agree, but you could sit down and talk with them. And Rob's absolutely right. You can't talk with these people because they're not interested in policy. They wouldn't understand a policy argument if they came up and bit him in the hindquarters, or the tuchus, as we say in Yiddish. Okay? When's the last time you heard any of these people get on Fox News and talk about Biden's economic plan and talk about the problems with it? Other than they don't like it, other than it's socialism. Can any one of these people even define what socialism is? Seriously. I guarantee you, if you sat down and said, okay, I want you to give me a definition of what you consider socialism, and if it's anything that we're doing right now, then aren't you a socialist? Give me an example. If we believe in the free market, why do we have municipal trash collection and municipal snow plowing? Rob, I know it's not a big issue down in Florida, but why is that a government function? Are there not companies who pick up trash for fees? Are there not people who plow driveways and other places for fees? Well, why is the government taking care of that? And why are they up in arms about that? What about the fire department? Pop quiz. The first fire departments, were they public? Let me rephrase that. In the United States of America, post the inauguration of the Constitution, were the first fire departments public or were they private? Anyone want to guess?
Started out as
Private.
volunteer, correct? Private.
They were private. Rob's right. And who financed them? Insurance companies. Back in the day, you would buy a fire insurance policy and you would put a plaque on your building. If your building burned down, you would call the insurance company and they would dispatch a fire company and they look for the plaque. If they saw the plaque, they put out the fire. If they didn't put out the fire. But now we have public fire. So you got socialism. You don't have a problem with that. Then either you're a hypocrite or you don't know what socialism is. Take your pick.
Before I get into the next topic, we actually have some breaking news. George Conway just retweeted. New York Times is just breaking news. The House committee and we're going to be talking about this in a little bit in the legal booth. The House committee that's investigating the January 6th attack, which is coming up, is now asking for Sean Hannity to be questioned. The Fox News host, as you guys know, who's real close to President Trump at that time. He is to give his answers on how much he cooperated, and they need to know about his communications with Donald Trump before and after the riots. So we're going to get into that. We've got a whole discussion coming up. So
I haven't read them, but what was released this afternoon at some point was the committee released or Congress released a series of text messages between Trump and Hannity from January 6th during the insurrection. And so they were in communication. Now, I don't know the substance of it. I don't know if Hannity was saying, hey, call this crap off, because we know that a lot of Trump supporters were quietly telling him to call it off, and then they somehow lost their voices after it was over. But that's
everything okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to turn something off here. That was I forgot to turn my phone off. So apparently there's some interesting connections. There were some interesting connections between Trump and Hannity from during the January 6th insurrection that they want to ask him questions about. We don't know the substance of them. Apparently, some of them have been released. So I guess you could read them, but I haven't read them yet, so I won't comment on it. But that's what it is. The interesting thing about that is Trump had originally been planning some kind of a speech, some kind of an event on January 6th, his own commemoration, right? And again, I don't know what he was going to hold, one of his famous rallies somewhere. I don't know the details. And he just canceled it after the release of those texts between he and Hannity. He canceled it. So that tells me that there's something interesting that was exchanged between them that was made public, that now Trump has been caused to cancel his event.
And he hasn't been popular on the campaign trail. He's been booed at a lot of places because he's telling people to get vaccinated, and they're not liking that. And the thing is, he's upset about it. It's like, well, you preached to these people for a whole entire year, you know? And yes, he did. He did give a speech before that. So let's get into the legal booth so we can start breaking this down. Heading into the before we get into the legal booth, yes, talking about crazy people. Melissa Carone, as you guys remember, who was in the video that I just showed before that Giuliani brought to court, and she made a mockery of herself. She's running for a GOP position in Michigan. How crazy, how scary is that this woman, Melissa Carone, and she is saying she's running on this whole platform that the government is trying to eliminate white people. She's running on this whole platform. Again, these are people who are scary, and they have people following them that believe in these beliefs. So people read up on these people, learn things about these people. Melissa Carone is as crazy as Cuckoo Cocoa Puffs, man. If she even gets into Michigan as a GOP, Rob just said it. You want to have 42 Marjorie Taylor Greens in government offices? This is insane.
Well, we talked about the critical race theory last month.
Yes, we did.
And we talked about that, and I raised the point, I'll raise it again, that first of all, no high school is teaching critical race theory because it requires a graduate level education to do it. But this is the exact same thing. The crazies are out there, people, and they're voting, and that's the problem.
Scary.
But this is not a unique problem. It was either Aristotle or Pluto said this. Plato, excuse me, not Pluto, not the dog. Plato, excuse me.
Plato, yeah, the
philosopher. I got Disney on my mind. Said that the penalty for not being involved in civic affairs is that you're ruled by your inferiors. Now, I don't want to sound like terribly elitist, but kind of am. This is what happens when you don't pay attention and you don't vote. The crazies come out of the woodwork. Okay? And they're out there. Or to quote my beloved father, who was very active in volunteer organizations for most of his life, who hated it because it was an incredible drain on his time. He once said, if I don't join, the idiots will take over. Well, got news for you, Dad. It looks like they are.
Rob,
well, this is this is the problem, right? That, we talked about how there used to be two more than two, but two main political parties that would do the nation's business and would communicate, agree, disagree, and all the things that were normal for 200 plus years. But in the last decade, you now have a Republican Party that this is their own decision. This isn't even about the voters. This isn't something the Democrats could be accused of doing. The Republican Party has jettisoned all of those mainstream conservatives, traditional Republicans, people who want to serve the people that they're elected to serve. They've gotten rid of all of them, at least on the House side. There are very few of them left, and they have all been replaced by design by the people who have taken over the Republican Party with people, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and this other candidate that we're talking about. And so what has happened is that the Republicans have embraced the extremism. They feel that it's their ticket to power, and they've cleaned house. They've eliminated their legitimate candidates, because what's happened is, and this is something Democrats really should have been paying attention to and learning. I'm not saying to do the same thing on the other side. That would be a mistake as well. But what I'm saying is the Democratic Party for decades has undervalued the role that these local races have played. And so what Republicans have done is the lowest level officials. They're running partisan candidates on school boards. They're replacing supervisors of elections in small towns. They're doing all of these things with these extremists, these apparatchiks that are being emplaced to do nothing other than, to get rid of democracy, to support the extremism and the future election stealing and what have you. And so what they've done now is by putting in these, Ken called them the crazies. They are in many ways crazy, but I think that gives them too much credit. They're dangerous is what they are. They're people who really are trying to dismantle democracy. And so what they've done is by putting these people in power, they run the local and state party apparatuses. And so I think that's the right plural, Ken. I don't know. You'll correct me. Apparati, I don't know. But what they've done now is,
I think you're right. I can't even. Never mind.
Yeah,
Keep going. I'm
they
sorry.
they have prevented the mainstream Republican candidates from actually being able to run in those primaries. That's the point of this whole thing. I'm sorry it took me a minute to get here. The problem is that mainstream conservatives, people like Adam Kinzinger in Illinois, right, who's doing some heroic work at his own cost. He can't run for re-election because of it, and people like him can't run as Republicans anymore. They have been prevented from running by the people who control their own party apparatus. And so in order to win a Republican primary, you have to at least appeal to this extremist base. Whether you really mean it or not, you have to use the rhetoric. You have to make them think, to make them think that you're a believer. And we can only hope that there are enough people faking it who, once they win the primary and perhaps win the election, go back to being a more sensible mainstream conservative, as opposed to a real Marjorie Taylor Greene type of lunatic, somebody that's really going there to dismantle democracy. Because if not, we're in deep doo-doo.
And we're gonna get right into the legal booth. Did you guys look at the new banner that I got up here for the legal booth? Trump did not order 10. This is one of the stories that I held over from last year. During these discussions about January 6th, Trump did not order the 10,000 troops to secure the Capitol. That's a lie. And you know what we got to say to that? Here we go. Donald Trump, why you always lying? That's my key for him. The thing about this is that we're gonna.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God! Stop fucking lying!
Stop lying, Donald Trump. Did not order the 10,000 troops, and there's all these stories that are coming out. There's a lot of people who are now flipping over as this investigation goes on, and people start to be questioned. In this latest next story, Peter Navarro. He was a close confidant to President Donald Trump and Steve Bannon. Peter Navarro just gave an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, and he is now admitting that Donald Trump had him put together a research file of bogus election fraud research, and he delivered them to the Congressional Republicans when he knew, himself, Peter Navarro, knew that this whole thing was bogus. And, now these people are all flipping. Rob, what do you think about a lot? Because there's another story of someone else that just recently flipped too. What are your thoughts on a lot of these people? Because you called it. You said a lot of these people are going to start flipping because they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to have their careers ruined.
Yeah, Navarro's not going to flip, and he is insisting. I just saw him on a show before we got started. That's kind of what I was paying attention to during the pregame here before we went on the air, and he was talking about what the plan really was. Now, of course, he's lying. When Peter Navarro is lying, because his lips are moving. But he's one of those dangerous liars. This is the thing, right? He's insistent. He's like the guy that's going to take 10 swings and say he still hasn't struck out yet because he's still swinging, right? And so Peter Navarro is he's going to keep going. He speaks very quickly. He's not a stupid person, that's for sure. And he just keeps on going and going and going. He speaks over people, and he just repeats lie after lie after lie after lie. These are all things that could be proven to be untrue, such as, the election results. It's interesting because what he claims is that they had no plan whatsoever to overthrow the election, to take over the Capitol and all that kind of thing. He says all they wanted to do was to send the votes from the 6 states in question, the same 6 we keep talking about, to send those back to be recounted in a fair and proper way. Well, obviously they had been counted 3 times before they ever got sent to Congress for certification. And each time it was very clear that Trump had lost, Biden had won. You could agree or disagree whether that's the right result, but that's clearly what happened. And what's interesting is, of course, in most of these places, you had Republicans in charge of the elections. It's not like you had, so how did the Democrats steal the elections when you had Republican election officials, Republican secretaries of state, Republican legislatures, Republican governors, right? Where was the Democratic plot to steal the election from Donald Trump in these 6 states? And so the whole thing is fallacious, right? But the fact is that they go around and just repeat it, and insist that that's what it was. That's not what it was. They didn't want a recount in those 6 states because they had already lost those recounts 6 ways from Sunday. And in fact, each time they recounted, the number went up for Biden and down for Trump. And when they found voter fraud, it was votes for Trump that were fraudulent. Dead people voted for Trump, not Biden. So they didn't want any more recounts. We know they didn't want any more recounts. So what did they want? They wanted Congress to not certify the election. They wanted the election thrown to the House of Representatives, which would have voted for Donald Trump in complete violation of their duty. They had the legal ability to do that because once it goes to the House, they get to vote for whoever they wanted to, which means they could ignore the vote of the American people. They could ignore the result of the Electoral College, which I think we could all criticize, but that's the prevailing system until we change the Constitution. And they wanted that result. They knew, they believed anyway, but they had reason to believe that if they could just get the election into the House of Representatives, they would win the presidency, because it doesn't go by each representative gets a vote. You go by state, and each state you go by the majority of the state. Well, the Republicans didn't have control of the House, but they had control of more than half the states. And so each state getting 1 vote, you would have had more than half the states voting for Trump, which would have represented less than half of the population of the United States, but that's not how they do it. And so the election would have gone to Donald Trump. That's what they were trying to do. They were trying to sow enough chaos to throw the election to the House, knowing that the House Republicans would not honor the vote of their own states, and they would vote according to party. And that's how they were going to overturn the election results. They didn't necessarily need the coup to succeed. They just needed the chaos.
Right. And we got another story here. Bernard Kerik, if you guys don't know who this is the New York Police Commissioner who was the assistant to Giuliani during those hearings when Giuliani was bringing up all the fraud cases. He's now been asked to turn over a batch of documents to the January 6th Select Committee. Are you up on that one also, Rob? Can you talk about that one? The documents that he had to send over?
I'll just say one thing, because I don't want to monopolize this topic here, but
no
Kerik, first of all, he's a convicted felon, okay? He was convicted of corruption. He served time. Trump pardoned him, all right? Trump knew him when he was the police commissioner of New York City. They got along. You can imagine why they got along. And when Trump became president, he pardoned Bernard Kerik, all right? So the fact that Kerik was part of this inner circle to try to, figure out how to steal the 2020 election shouldn't surprise anybody. Kerik is going to be loyal to Trump, and he's probably desperate enough to try to get Trump reelected in 2024 so he gets another pardon.
Ken, anything you want to add to that before the next topic?
Yeah, if I may, just really quickly, I want to go back to Rob's comment about how the right-wing fanatics were attacking their apparently their own party because they're the ones who certified the election. You need to understand that these people referred to those Republicans as and I do apologize if I'm going to denigrate anyone, as rhinos. Republicans in name only, RINO. They don't view them as Republicans. They view them as Democrats parading as Republicans. That's the only way they can get elected. That's what these people feel. These people do not want democracy. They want to use it for gaining power, and then that's it. They have no concept of our Republican form of government. They cannot accept that they lost. As Rob pointed out, they want to move it into the House of Representatives so they could steal the election. And they still are talking about this. This is over a year and a half out. All the cases have been dismissed. There's been no finding of fraud except for a few cases, and they're all been Trump supporters. So this is not a party or not individuals who are interested in having a legitimate election where the winner takes all. They're interested in winning, period. If they win, great. If they lose, it's fraud. If I may quote John F. Kennedy, who says, it's very hard, near impossible, to negotiate with someone who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable. And that's what we have here.
Crazy stuff. And breaking news, as we became before we came on the air, prosecutor drops groping charges this afternoon against former New York Governor Cuomo. One of the things that stuck out is that the prosecutor said that the claimant, which is the person who put the call out there and charged him, he got charged for this. They said, actually, I have the actual quote. I actually put that in our chat. But I guess she wasn't working with. I guess she was unable to work with these people and the prosecutors. I'm just going to ask these guys real quick who can answer this one. What happens here to where the claimant, becomes to the point where the prosecutor's like, you know what, there's nothing here, or could she have been paid off? That could be another thought. Did they get to her and did the Cuomos pay her off? And now she's, kind of think on that one.
Let me just say this, and I've run across this problem in my own practice.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Witnesses are really good at coming forward when everyone is listening to their story without a critical eye. When they find out that they're going to get cross-examined by an attorney like myself or Colonel Resnick or any of our colleagues, all of a sudden they get cold feet because we're going to drag up things that they don't want to talk about, and then they become very uncooperative. And I've seen cases, and I'm sure I don't want to speak for Rob, but my guess is he's seen cases like that when the rubber meets the road, these people actually have to testify, and that just put things under oath, and all the details come out, they get cold feet because what they say initially is, well, they may have left out a few things, or there may be things they don't want to talk about, which I want to talk about, and all of a sudden they don't want to talk about it because it's all it's all fine and dandy when no one is questioning their story, and that happens a lot. And do I think Cuomo reached these people? Possible, but I doubt it. I think it's just simply the case just fell apart, and these cases fall apart all the time.
Wow. Tough stuff there. Anything you want to add to that before we move on, R-Squared?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think it's clear from things that we're able to see. We don't know all the facts because nothing has gone to trial in a public forum or anything like that. I think we know that he certainly has a problem. Cuomo has a problem with his conduct, right? There's no doubt in my mind that he did inappropriate things. I don't know exactly what he did because I'm not privy to it, but there's so much out there that I'm sure he did some things that deserve, to be held accountable for them. And, the problem is this, though, when first of all, sexual assault. I don't know whether he committed a sexual assault or whether he did other violations. I'm not commenting on that. I'm saying, generally speaking, sexual assault is a scourge in our society. It continues to be for decades. We need to do something about that. And so we have made great strides in the way that we handle those cases. In fact, I believe we had Bridget on the show a couple of years ago who talked about that, right? Yes. And she's one of the heroes who's been leading the charge on improving the way that we handle those cases. And so, I think that, when somebody comes forward, we obviously have to do what we can to do a proper investigation and see where the truth may lie what do we believe and what we can prove. Sometimes they're not the same thing. And sometimes that's what happens in these cases, that you have somebody making allegations, but you can't find the evidence to prove them, and then you have to make some difficult decisions. Sometimes you can find evidence that supports serious charges, and you can go forward and hold somebody accountable and do the right thing, and that's a win. But sometimes you don't even have enough to take a case forward. I don't know what happened to these cases. When you have somebody like a Cuomo who is, he's involved in politics. Not that political leaders are, always facing false allegations or anything like that. But when you're in the public eye, there's always that risk anyway. But let me say this: in my history of doing these cases, I have found very few false allegations. Women don't want to come forward and make false allegations and put themselves through a very, very difficult, emotionally and otherwise difficult process. But it happens sometimes, right? It's not that it happens 0% of the time. It's a lower percentage of the time than most people would think. But it does happen sometimes, and when you get somebody like a Cuomo that can be incendiary, that could be politically charged, then that's where you have to at least take a look at it. And so the fact that there were a number of complainants that came forward would make me think that they're certainly not all making it up. Now, maybe one or two of them were, because they said, here's an opportunity to get at this guy for some reason. But I think overall, my starting point is I believe when somebody comes forward, and that's why we do an investigation. Investigations can't always turn up facts or sufficient facts, but we have to at least make the effort. We have to give somebody their day. And if it looks like somebody has made it up, then we can take action in that regard. But that doesn't happen as often as people might think. And so in these particular cases, when they dropped a couple of cases. I think it was Westchester was the one a couple of weeks ago that had to drop it because they looked at the criminal statute, and what he was accused of doing didn't even violate the criminal statute. If I remember that case correctly, I could be wrong. This particular case, it seemed to be an issue of corroborating the allegation and the cooperation of the witness. I will tell you, as somebody, I never shied away from prosecuting cases. If I believed the act occurred, we did something, whether we went to trial or made a deal, or we didn't shy away from difficult cases if we believed that we had facts to use. And if we lost, we lost, but we were going to give people their day in court, and we were going to try to hold the defendant accountable in some way. Even if they win their case, at least they maybe got scared by having to go through the process. It was always worth doing it. But you can't do it at all if you don't have a cooperating witness. Ken will tell you this as a defense attorney. If the prosecution tries to bring a case of personal conduct like this, where somebody hurt somebody, or the allegation is somebody hurt somebody, and that person doesn't cooperate, isn't there to talk about, this is what happened to me, this is, and share all that information, there's no case to be made. And so what I think you posted earlier today, Sinister One, is that there was an issue where this particular individual chose not to, for reasons I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate, but chose not to cooperate in the ongoing investigation, which would make it virtually impossible to bring charges to trial. And I'm speculating here a little bit because I don't have all the facts. I'm just trying to speak more generally about how these things go down. I don't think Cuomo, I thought I kind of liked him initially. I don't like him now. I believe that he's problematic in this area, but that doesn't mean that we've got to follow due process for everybody, and you've got to have a good investigation and a proper set of facts and a credible witness. And something's missing in some of these cases. I don't know what's going to happen in the rest of them.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, when I read it, my first thought is they got to her and paid her. And that's
I don't
hate
believe
to say
that.